is Writer to Writer. I'm your host, Kat Filer, aka KJ Filer, author of Shadowrunner. My guest today is George Weinstein. He wears a lot of hats. He is an award-winning author of the beloved Southern historical novel Hardscrabble Road, the sequel, Return to Hardscrabble Road, which, by the way, is a winner of the Literary Titan Book Award, the kidnapping thriller Watch What You Say, and so much more. George is a popular speaker with book clubs and literary festivals. He's fond of telling readers the stories behind the stories and providing writers with advice he wished he'd received when he embarked on his writing career. George is an executive director for Atlanta Writers Club and more. He manages 2 conferences per year for AWC to give writers access to publishing house editors, literary agents, and other industry professionals. George, it's so good to see you, and I'm so glad you could join me today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me, Kat.
Yeah, I mean, you were one of the first people I thought of. So let's start with some questions about the publishing industry. In
Yeah.
your role at AWC, what's your advice for upcoming writers and authors?
Let's see, for the writer who's just starting out, my big piece of advice is to find your tribe. Find a group of writers, and it doesn't have to be a writing organization like the Atlanta Writers Club, though, I think an organization that presents lots of educational opportunities and networking opportunities is good. But if you can just find a small group of writers to start with, who can support you, who can make you a better writer, through critique, through advice. You'd never want to be the smartest person in the room. You never want to be the most experienced person in the room. You want to surround yourself with people who are, just better rounded writers who have more experience and are willing to kind of lift you up. And that will put you in a position to later do the same for other people.
Yeah.
So I think that's the most important thing for a writer just starting out, is to find their tribe, because writing is such a lonely thing. It's such a lonely pursuit, and you gotta find people who understand you, understand what you're going through as a writer, in order to just provide you with some support. For authors, and I define an author as anybody who has completed a manuscript and is seeking publication, if not already published. You got to really define what your goals are. You can't thrash around, because there are just too many options available to you. So you got to know what you want. Are you an entrepreneurial type who wants to steer your own ship and call all the shots? If so, learn everything you can about self-publishing and steer your boat in that direction. There are just a tremendous number of resources now to help the self-published writer, and it's best suited to people who want this to be a business, who really want to treat this like a business. If you want other people to do the work for you, then you want to go in the traditional publishing route. And then the question is, what are your aspirations? Do you want to be a New York Times bestselling writer? If so, you need to get a literary agent first, because you need to get somebody behind you who can go after one of the big 5 publishers. You cannot get those people on your own. You get them through a literary agent representation. If you are content to have a smaller publisher where you will get a little more say, you might not get as much attention, you might not get the ego stroke by saying to other people, I'm published by HarperCollins or Penguin Random House or Hachette or Macmillan. If that doesn't matter to you, but instead you want a good-looking book that you can be proud of, then and also have a little more say, then go after smaller presses by all means. It's great to shoot for the stars, but keep the smaller presses in mind. There are some just great up and coming presses like Black Rose Writing, Source Books. There are plenty of them out there, and they are looking for more and more authors. So don't discount the little guys, because someday they might be the bigger guys. And I found that the smaller presses are much more willing to work with authors, to do marketing, to really help them along, much more so, shockingly, than the big guys. The big guys still put their money behind the safe bets, right? They they pour all their money behind authors who frankly don't need any help. Stephen King could post on Twitter that I've got a new book coming out, and he'll sell 5 million copies, just on his own. He doesn't need, his publisher throwing millions of dollars at him in advertising, and yet that's what they do. They don't throw the millions of dollars at all the up and coming writers that they've signed, who desperately need that support. But it's a weird business, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Well, and I was just talking to somebody today about rejection. It's sort of inherent. It doesn't matter what avenue you take. But I think that the best coping skill I ever saw for that was an author that I used to represent. I was her publicist. She used to carry around a trash can to conferences like AWC whenever she would do a presentation, and it was decoupaged with rejection slips inside and out. And I thought it was the best metaphor ever.
Yeah.
Because she says this is where they go, all of them.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I guess carrying around a decoupage toilet would be too heavy.
It might be a little heavy. Yeah, sorry. And you have already answered my next question, which is, in your mind, what's the difference between an author and a writer? Or do you have more to say about that?
No, I think anybody who has even put down one sentence about something they want to write, whether it's an essay or a poem or a novel, a book of nonfiction, they're a writer. They do not need somebody's permission to call themselves a writer. In fact, as soon as they start on their very first project, they should tell other people, I am a writer. And there's something so powerful about making that declaration. You kind of make yourself a little more responsible for seeing things through, once you step up and say, I am a writer. Writers write. So anybody who is even started on a project is a writer. An author, I think, is somebody who's got work out there that they're actively pursuing publication with, or that they have already seen through to publication.
I'm glad to hear you, though, say that somebody who's finished a manuscript, even if it isn't published, has the right to call themselves an author, because that's a monumental task.
Absolutely. Most writers never finish what they've started. So by gum, if we finish it, we ought to be able to call ourselves an author. You ought to be able to step up one rung.
Right.
Yeah.
Author. So at the writers conference, you have agents and you have editors and all sorts of resources like that. And I believe it would be one of it's one of the best I've ever been to. And I'm not saying
thank you.
Really, I'm not just saying that. I mean it. But I noticed that there are also different levels of sort of membership, if you will. I mean, everybody pays the same for their membership, but then there's something there for everyone. So if you already have an agent, you should still go. There's always something to find. I found a couple of workshops at the last one that were just something I hadn't even thought of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the Atlanta Writers Conference, this is our 29th that we just launched this week. It's on November 3rd and 4th. We hold it at the Westin Atlanta Airport Hotel down near the Atlanta airport. And over the years, just listening to feedback from participants, I've tried to build in, like you say, something for everybody. There's certainly plenty of opportunities to meet with literary agents and acquisitions editors who work for publishers. And I go after boutique agents who work
Okay.
for very small agencies all the way up to those who work for very large agencies. And if I can get them, the founder of those agencies. So we have Gina Panettiere, who's founded Talcott Notch, which is this huge literary agency in California, down to very very small boutique ones that only have a few agents working for them, and then the same with the publishers. I have uh, acquisitions editors from Penguin Random House and HarperCollins, but I also have the founder of History of Books, Dr. Kurt Brackhub, who has 7 imprints with his History of Books, and is actively seeking authors, and they produce beautiful books across a variety of genres. So there's plenty of opportunities to pitch these people, get manuscript critiques. They'll critique a sample of your manuscript along with a synopsis and a query letter. They will also critique query letters to help you hone those so that when you have your pitch meetings, you're putting your best stuff out there. All those kind of things that I think are just like baseline necessity of any writers' conference. But then we do workshops and Q&A panels with the agents and editors, mini seminars on both Friday and Saturday. So you have lots of opportunities to learn, even if you're done and you have agent representation and they're selling your books. There's still opportunities to learn. You are never done learning as a writer and as an author. I get very frustrated when I talk to some writers who just kind of declare themselves done. I've learned everything I need to know. I just need a shot. I just need somebody to give me a chance. And my God, you're never done. The big best-selling authors I've talked to all say the same thing. When I start on a new book, it's like I'm starting from scratch. It's like I've never learned a thing, and I'm having to learn it all over again because it's a new project with new characters, new themes, new settings, new plot, new everything. So it's a new experience, and they have things to learn, and they are still eager to learn.
Well,
So,
and I like your a la carte sort of approach
mhm,
to this too, because
yeah.
there is something for everybody. And the other thing is, I believe that I found my confidence by going to writers' conventions. I know
Hmm.
yours is really good about that. There's a mixer, and it sounds
Yeah,
like a silly thing, like, oh, I'm not going to go to that. Yes, you are. Go,
yeah,
because that's where
you
you'll find
ought
your
to.
tribe if you haven't found a critique group.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. So yeah. So the mixer's a wonderful opportunity to meet people. Everybody's holding drinks, and and just a little more laid back. The pressure's off for the evening. You can kind of let your hair down, be yourself. And then you can also have conversations with the agents and editors there and discover that these are real people. They're not monsters. They're not supernatural beings who have godlike powers. They're just folks, and they just happen to be folks who work in the industry that you want to break into. And so I think that opportunity to just mix and mingle and meet other people and discover that, hey, I belong here. Uh, I'm not the smartest person in the room, but I'm by no means out of my depth. So yeah, it's just a way to find people who love books and the people who write them and buy them.
Yeah, and I think also it's a good place to start getting your feet wet. Like the imposter syndrome is very real and it never goes away ever. I don't know anybody who doesn't suffer from that. And with every single thing that's coming out, this is not good. It's not going to be good. And then it is. But
Yeah,
if you go and you hang out with other people who are going through the same thing, if nothing else, you can commiserate.
that's right.
So there's
Yep,
that.
absolutely, absolutely, and that's why it's so important for writers who are just starting out to
Yeah.
go to these kind of events as well, because they will quickly see that, oh, I'm not alone.
Right.
That, I've just talked to 4 other people who get woken up in the middle of the night by a character who's demanding a bigger role in their books. And I thought I was insane. And it turns out I'm just a writer, and we all go through the same kind of things that other people would say is nuts, but for us is just par for the course.
Yeah. Well, switching gears for a minute, I'd like to talk to you as an author,
Sure.
because you're definitely an author. And so I just got done reading Hardscrabble Road. For you, what scene was the most difficult to write and why?
I was really lucky growing up. I grew up very middle class, very stable home, 2 loving parents, and so the backstory of Hardscrabble Road is it's based on the childhood of my former father-in-law. So
Oh,
my first wife's father was Bud in the book. He's the titular character. And I spent 10 years writing down his horrifying, blood-curdling childhood stories about growing up during the Great Depression at the bottom economic rung. He was the child of sharecroppers. And his father was just a sociopath, psychopath probably. And his mother had no interest in raising her kids. She was too busy sleeping with every other man in Miller County. And so he and his 2 older brothers and older sister pretty much had to raise each other during the Great Depression with just very few supports. And it's about how they got through it. So I spent 10 years writing down these stories that were fascinating to me because they could not have been any more different from my own childhood. And so I think it was the scenes of emotional and physical cruelty that they were subjected to, that you would not believe that adults would treat children this way, but they were treated that way. And I suspect even worse. I suspect my former father-in-law, was pulling his punches a little bit in some of the stories he told.
yeah.
But
Yeah. I mean, even when you pull from your own life, I think you tend to
yeah,
tone things down a bit. Um,
yeah. So so it was those scenes that were the hardest to write, just because it was just so brutal. And I, tended to tone things down because I wanted to still make it a book that you would want to read. And none of us would want to experience what these kids actually experienced. And so, I found myself pulling my own punches. But still, it's a book that probably comes with 100 trigger warnings because it is so tough. Hardscrabble Road was a real physical place, but it's also an excellent metaphor for these kids' journey through childhood. It was a very hard Scrabble road.
I have to tell you, it
Uh,
was the title that pulled me in
yeah, yeah,
before I even had met you. So yeah.
yeah. Thank you. But it's ultimately an inspirational story because they all get through it. Not to spoil things, because I never write a book with a depressing ending. My books always have a happy ending, and their lives had happy endings. They all 3 boys escaped into the military and went on to be just outstanding individuals. And all of them broke those chains of abuse and poverty, and their kids grew up living a much better life than they did as kids. So they won, they succeeded,
Is
and
he still with you?
no, they're all gone.
Oh, God.
They've all passed away.
Did
So
any of them know about the book?
well, I actively worked with my former father-in-law on the early chapters of the book. So if it read very realistically, like, God, how did this guy know about, you know, slaughtering hogs in the 1930s, or what was it like to ride on a school bus in 1938? It's because I interviewed him and his 2 older brothers at length, and took copious notes, and just wanted to make sure I got all the details right. So it was that was a real labor of love, and it took me 10 years to come out with the sequel, Return to Hardscrabble Road, which just dropped last year. And I just finished listening to the audiobook version and getting that approved for distribution, let's see, a month or two ago. And that was a fun process, working with an audiobook narrator and somebody who really got the people. He kept telling me, well, these are my people. That's how I'm able to do the voices and the tone of voice so accurately. These are the people I grew up with. I knew these people.
Yeah.
So
Did you have any say in who the narrator was?
oh yeah, I handpicked him. I listened to over 2 dozen auditions, and this guy, hands down. In fact, Kim, my wife, told me, if you don't pick this guy, you're crazy, because he sounds exactly like the people she grew up with, and she thought he'd do them justice, and by God, he did.
Yeah, well, that's great. And so what was the most fun book or process?
I've got a brand new book that's coming out that I haven't told anybody about. So this is a cover reveal.
Why?
This is a sci-fi book. And you can tell by the expression of this character, this is a comedy. It's a
Okay.
sci-fi comedy. I call it a pre-apocalyptic sci-fi comedy called Offlining. And this is a book I was almost embarrassed to bring out. It's something that had been collecting virtual dust in my computer for a decade. And every couple of years, I'd bring it out and I'd polish it some more and think, oh, I don't dare publish this thing, because there's something in there to offend everybody. There's
That's the best kind.
I take pot shots at religious zealotry, political zealotry, sexual mores, class system, everything. Everything is fair game. And so it was delightful fun to write, because it's unlike anything I've ever written. In all of my books, there's a little humor, but this is intentionally very funny, and to the point of being almost slapstick sometimes. So people will be surprised, by that.
Quite the
Oh,
departure.
I didn't know George had a sense of humor. Uh,
Well,
and
that's awesome.
Yeah, and I didn't know George was so interested in sex, and I didn't know George could do this or that. So it's quite a departure for me. But again, Kim convinced me that I ought to get it out there.
Well, you guys are the dynamic duo, to be sure.
Yeah.
Um,
So I did publish it as G.J. Weinstein, though, just to create a little distance
okay.
from my other books. So just in case, because I have a readership that skews older than many of my author friends, and so lots of people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and I was just honestly afraid of offending people who, oh, I just love your Hardscrabble Road series, and then I get this, and oh my God, this is it's scandalous. So I don't want to scandalize anybody. So there'll be a little separate there.
Well, there's
Just
no such thing as bad publicity. So,
yeah.
as long as it's selling.
Yeah,
Oh,
maybe I can get it banned,
but
That
yeah,
would
I'm
that would
hoping
be
for that.
helpful.
Don't we all hope for that? Yeah, that's best thing ever. How many books have you written?
Let's see. So this would be my eighth novel. I've got 6 in wide distribution. This will be the 7th, and then I wrote the very first novel I had published. I wrote for a nonprofit that wanted an adventure story specifically aimed at middle grade boys, to get them to read. It was a group of pilots, and they do leadership talks for children, Boy Scouts and the like. and they wanted a kind of something to leave behind that had all of their leadership ideas in it, but kind of hidden behind an adventure story. So they would almost subliminally be getting these leadership lessons while they were enjoying
That
you know,
sounds
an adventure story. So it was called Jake and the Tiger Flight, and they still sell it at their hangar in Rome, Georgia, this Tiger Flight Foundation. But that was the very first book I had published. I had written Hardscrabble Road and a few others before then, but this was the first one to actually get in print and make me some money.
Hmm. Well, I wouldn't have guessed that. I'll have to go look for that one. Then you've told us about your next book. Can you tell us when it's coming out?
Yeah, so it's officially coming out on June 29th,
Ooh,
and I'll I'll be doing signings for it this month and next month. Um, so then it's back to the drawing board. I've got a couple of projects I've been working on. One's a sequel to my mystery Aftermath, where I take the heroine of that one and the heroine of Watch What You Say and bring them together. But I have discovered that selling sequels to the public is tough.
good.
It's interesting. There are people who just love sequels, but then there are completionists who want the entire series or none at all. So they don't want to buy book one knowing that they've got to wait for books 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6. They want to buy all 6 books at once and then binge read them all, preferably in a compendium, some
Yeah.
kind of omnibus collection, and and get through it all together rather than saying, oh my God, I got to wait a year for the next book. I got to wait another year for the next book.
So then,
Um,
as an author, then do you wait until they're all done, or do
so,
you?
well, that's what a number of self-published authors do, is
Okay.
they put together, a bank of books and then release them, every 2 months. Here's another book, in the series, and then you can buy the whole series if you want to. But it's funny, I'll do these book signings, and at every one of them, somebody will come up to me and say, "Oh my God, I loved Hardscrabble Road," and I'll say, "Here's the sequel. It just came out. Would you like to buy it?" And they almost never buy it.
Oh
They
no.
uh it's like, oh well, I've got a lot of books right now, and so it's like they told me they love the first book but they won't buy the second book. And so there's a part of me that's a little worried about writing a sequel to Aftermath and Watch What You Say, because I'll get the same thing. Well, I'll give the first one a try, and then I'll go to the second book if I like it, or well, I read the first one and that was enough for me.
Well, and it could possibly, in that case, it might be the subject to some
Yep,
degree because it's
yep,
a
it
hard
it
book.
could be. Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Even when I promise them, oh well, the boys are older and they have agency and they can make their own decisions and call their own shots. No, it's been tough selling it in person. It's been selling online, but it's interesting. Trying to sell to somebody in person has proven to be more difficult than I expected.
Yeah.
So that's a life lesson. And I've also got this huge historical fiction project that'll take me years to embark on, and I've got well, I'll swing the camera around and
Okay.
see that there's a big stack of books over
Oh
there,
my.
and
Oh,
that's my reading for that novel.
oh
Um,
wow.
and it's endless. It's set in early 19th century Florida, which was owned by Spain at that time, which most people have forgotten or never learned. Um, and slaves escaping from South Carolina, Georgia, and Alabama. There was no Underground Railroad in the early 19th century. Most of them did not go north. They went south to Florida. And the Spanish, if you swore your allegiance to the king and converted to Catholicism, the Spanish would free you and often give you a job in St. Augustine. So if you sailed past Castillo de San Marcos on that giant, beautiful Spanish fort on the shores of St. Augustine. If you sailed past that in 1910, for example, you'd see the classic conquistadors up on the walls with their pikes and the helmets and all that. And half of them would be black,
Wow.
which most people don't know about. So it's a bit of forgotten history. So always found that kind of stuff fascinating, forgotten history. And so I'm still trying to figure out how to tackle that book.
I'm really glad to see you uh, tackling that because it is a tale I am familiar with. We lived in Jacksonville,
Yeah.
and I had some author friends that lived in St. Augustine that were historians. Patrick passed away just recently,
Mm,
Patrick Smith, and he was doing an awful lot about the local history, and I was absolutely shocked. I mean, it's an old town. You go to the fort and stuff like that, but there's so much out there.
yeah.
I through him I learned about what the Matanzas River was all about, why it was called Matanzas. I learned about the Tamaquan Indians,
Yeah.
because there's no hills in Florida, but there are a few, and they're actually garbage heaps
Yeah.
from a tribe that no longer is here. So that it's very interesting, and I'm glad to see that you're doing something. I know that you'll do a really good job with that, and it's a
Well,
very
thank you.
interesting.
Thanks. It's it's a tough it's tougher and tougher for authors to write outside their lanes.
Mhm.
And you often get criticized if you're a white person writing about Latinos or blacks or Asians. If you're a black author, you get criticized for writing about anybody, outside of your race, and on and on and on. Where everybody seems to be so conscientious about, um, you know, accidentally doing an injustice that we, we don't want to risk it. But honestly, that's where the interesting stories are to me, is the intersections of the races, the intersections of cultures.
Mhm. And you had a really nice speaker at the AWC, Tanya,
Tanya
and
Todd. Yeah.
Tanya Todd, and she did a whole workshop on diversity in writing.
Yep.
And it was really, really interesting from that point of view. I know several people who are writing sort of, as you say, outside their lane, and there are stories that need to be told. And these are people who have the skill to tell the story, but it's not their culture. But I also know that they're being very careful about the
Yeah.
research involving people in it and stuff. So I think it's still okay to do that as long as you have that in mind that it could be a difficult task.
Yeah, absolutely. And that you will get criticized.
Yeah,
It's
you
it's
will. Oh,
inevitable.
that's just
Um,
if you write a book,
yeah.
you're going to get criticized.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
that's just a
A-
given. One of my
absolutely.
friends just told me, "You're not real yet," and I said, "Why?" And she says, "You haven't got a 1 star. You're
Star
not real."
review. Oh yeah, absolutely. And they're brutal. I got a call from a friend of mine the other day. He says, "How do you handle 1 star reviews?" I said, "I don't read reviews.
Yeah.
I just had to stop reading reviews." I got a 1 star review on my mystery Aftermath
Okay.
because it's a mystery.
Okay.
The reviewer said, "This is a mystery. I don't like mysteries.
Yeah.
Why
Okay.
did you buy this book? And why are you penalizing me for that?"
I
I
know.
don't know, but that 1 star will be there for all time.
There was
Um,
a mutual friend of ours who just recently sent me a panic-stricken PM and said, "I got a 1 star." Ah!
yeah,
And I said,
yeah,
"Yeah." And she said, "It's awful. I want you to read it." And I said, "I don't want to read it." And
mhm,
so while she
yeah,
was trying to get this thing to me, I went ahead and popped online and I pulled up the 1 star reviews for some of Stephen King's books and
yes.
sent her links to it and said, "Nobody gets out of here without a
Mm,
1 star."
a-
So,
absolutely.
you
Yeah,
know,
and that's the comfort. That was exactly the right thing to do, is you will see 1 star reviews for Where the Wild Things Are,
sure, yeah.
with all the classic books. There's somebody out there who hated it, and there's nothing you can do about it.
The best 1 star I saw was the person didn't like the book because it arrived damaged.
Yes, yes, and they therefore they punished the author for that. In their mind, if you interviewed them, they would have said, "I had no intention of punishing the author. I know it's not their fault. I wanted
Right,
to punish Amazon, so
right.
I left a 1 star review." Well, don't you understand that's punishing the author? Amazon doesn't care.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, they don't understand that. So you mentioned that Kim, your wife Kim, also
Yep.
writes. I know she's got a book coming out that
Yep. Yeah.
I had the
So
privilege of beta reading, and I'm very excited about that. And I want to ask about that book, but I also want to ask what it's like to have two literary pros under one roof.
it's fabulous because we can both be each other's sounding board for plots and characters. I think that's the greatest service I do for her is, listening to, the book she's developing and, and her saying, well, I can't figure out what's supposed to happen now. And then just brainstorming with her, well, this could happen, this could happen. And her just getting a different point of view often clicks things into place. And she almost never uses my ideas, but she comes up with her own even better ideas because she's been able to bounce it off of somebody. And it's it's so helpful commiserating
Yeah.
because oh my God, I got a 1-star review, or oh my God, the books arrived damaged, or they didn't arrive at all, or this is happening or that's happening. There's always some stressor that is shortening our lives by degrees. This is such a tough biz, and daily it seems there's an obstacle thrown at you that you have to climb over, go under, or get around. And it's really helpful having somebody you can just swing your chair around and commiserate with, or ask for advice from. But Kim Connery is just a fabulous author. She does sci-fi and fantasy, and her new novel is Nicholas Eternal,
Mm.
which is about an immortal who has a very damaged soul and is looking for a way out, but maybe about to run into the love of his life who could save him.
It was one of the most unique in that genre that I've ever read.
Yeah.
And I am excited to see what kind of response she gets because it's so outside the box.
Yeah, it is. It's really audacious, courageous
Oh, yeah.
writing. She could have played it safe any number
Mhm.
of ways, and instead she decided to just tackle not just one tough topic, but umpteen tough things, and really challenging characters and fascinating characters. It's
And great development too.
yep,
I was lucky enough to be in a critique session,
yep,
and this is going to sound strange, but I'm hoping that it piques the interest of the listeners. She was asking how we could make it better, and we all kind of sat around going, because she's such a good writer. And finally I
yep,
said, I want to see those daggers.
yeah,
And
right,
she
right,
said, oh, and that
yeah.
was it. But she is so good at putting you right there that listening to something in real time, it's really hard to step back, and because it just happened to you.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. She's one of the best authors I know at characterization.
Yeah.
Uh, and she will develop these incredibly complicated people, complex characters, and then she will pit them
Yeah.
against one another, or have them develop relationships with each other, and everybody's relationships are different. So, character A and character B have a different relationship than character A and character C, and the banter is different, the tone of voice, the just everything is different, and it all just comes out of her head that way. So I see the first drafts, and they spring fully formed from her forehead like Athena coming from Zeus. It's just really, really
Well, from
remarkable.
both of
She's
you, I
fantastic.
see the development in characters. I'm very excited about reading your next book because I could pick up your book, and she's the same way. I could pick up your book and forget the names, and I could recognize who I'm listening to, who's
Oh, that's great.
what's
Thank you.
happening. So, and because how that is, and especially when you're busy, you put something down and then you come back and you think, well, I should back up a couple of pages, but that
Mhm.
doesn't happen, not
You
much.
don't need to. No, that's good to know.
Yeah.
And that's a skill you only develop over time.
Yeah, and I'm
That's
often reading more than one book at a time.
yeah,
So that also plays into that. So if you're
Yeah,
able to keep me engaged enough that when I pick your book up, I'm saying, oh, I remember
yeah,
what was happening, then that's something.
yeah,
So
yeah. That's great. Thank you. Appreciate that.
and this is not it, but as an author, what's the best compliment you've ever gotten?
Oh gosh.
Nice.
There's some that are really undeserved. So back when I was reading reviews, of Hardscrabble Road, this is one of the best books I've read and all of that. I think they just haven't read enough books. But, things like that. There is it's a kind of a longish story, but on the cover of Hardscrabble Road, there are three boys, and it's a photograph that was taken in 1937 of my former father-in-law and his two older
Oh,
brothers.
okay.
So the smallest boy holding out this can of worms to the boy in the center of the picture, that little boy is Bud. So that's my former father-in-law in 1937. He's holding the can out to the middle brother Chet, and the oldest brother Jay is off to the side holding that long stick. And that's the only picture that exists of them as children. And
Yeah.
I am asked time and again, where did you buy this photograph? Because it's an
Yeah.
amazing photo. And I say, well, no, it's of three actual people, and I tell the story about my former father-in-law. Well, there was a woman, I was doing a book talk, and she was so moved by the story, but also by the picture on its own that she painted a watercolor of it and
Oh,
then sent it to me, and I have it hanging in my house. And she made a copy of her for herself as well. And she wrote to me after the sequel came out to let me know that her husband had recently passed away, and every day one of his great delights was looking at that painting
oh,
that she had done of my book cover, and just talking about, kind of almost spinning stories about what those boys would have been like, and what do you think they do after they finish fishing, on the creek where the photograph was taken and all.
yeah.
So gosh, is there any better compliment
That's a pretty
to
good one.
to know that this helps somebody, find some ease in the last days of their life.
Yes,
That's
that's
my God.
definitely a monumental compliment.
Yeah.
So is there a question that I haven't asked that you would have liked me to ask? And if so, how would you answer that?
Oh, let's see. I always like to tell the story of when I started to write.
Okay.
Uh, so uh, I was one of those kids who, as soon as he learned how to read, wanted to write, wanted to tell my own stories. And so the very first things I wrote were superhero plays, starring all of my favorite stuffed animals. And I wrote them as plays so I could act them out on top of my bed to entertain my brother and sister. And I did like a cover, so I did cover art, and then I did, I had the cast of characters, and then, I would read the play, and I was acting out, with Marty Monkey and Curious George and Little Kong and all my other favorite stuffed animals on top of the bed. And this was not something my parents ever suggested that I do to, occupy myself. It's just, there was something in my brain, there was something the way my brain is wired, that as soon as I learned to read, I wanted to write. And
Mm.
so the 6-year-old me, who was just starting to embark on those plays, and they were god awful, uh, but the kid who was just starting out telling stories would have been delighted to know that 51 years later he was still, writing things to entertain people.
Well, I'm sure that I wish you could go back in time and tell them, but I'm really glad that you persevered because you are certainly
Thank
a
you.
good author, one of my favorite, and
Oh, thank you.
Kim would be in there too. So, well, George, it has been a pleasure as always. And for listeners, I will post links below so you can find the Atlanta Writers Conference. You can find George, his author page, and also all of his books. And I hope everybody looks for you because if you have not read George's books, you really are missing out. You're so diverse.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah. So anyway, it's been a pleasure, and I
Yeah,
will probably see you soon. I'm back in
l-
Georgia.
looking forward to it. Thank you so much, Kat.
All right, it's been a pleasure. Bye bye, George.
Okay, bye now.